John Harbaugh spoke at the NFL League meetings on Monday, and he broke some decently major Lamar Jackson and Baltimore Ravens news, as well as had some other interesting things to say. We talk about that and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this Tuesday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day, free and available all podcasting platforms, including in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and in audio form where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens show. So Monday through Friday, every single weekday, we have you covered with daily Ravens coverage. Plus, we go live after every single Ravens game, every piece of Ravens big news. On the weekends, we have bonus episodes when there are headlines to talk about. So if you want daily Ravens coverage, keep it locked in here on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Tuesday, we're here. We're talking Ravens. John Harbaugh. I said it on yesterday's show. I'm like, if John Harbaugh speaks, I don't know what is going to happen, but we'll react to it. And that's exactly what we're going to do here today. John Harbaugh spoke bright and early on Monday to reporters about a lot of different things. And he had some news that he broke and talked about Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, DeAndre Hopkins. There's a lot. So we're going to dive into all of that, both from the first and the second parts of the show. We'll start off with Lamar Jackson, the thing that he broke with Lamar, and we'll get into Mark Andrews and the stance John Harbaugh took in the second part of the show. Then in the final part of the show, we got the International Ravens. We'll talk about what I mean by that, as well as some more draft talk, because again, draft is less than a month away, which is still so crazy to me. It still feels like the season ended yesterday, which I wish it didn't. I wish the Ravens had their season extended past the divisional round, but hey, that's what we're working towards this offseason. Hopefully Baltimore will be able to get over that hump. But let's talk about it. John Harbaugh was asked about Lamar Jackson. Obviously, it's a pretty big topic of conversation, right? Lamar is a decently big part, just a little part of what the Ravens do. And Harbaugh had, obviously, he was praising Lamar, making sure that he was giving Lamar his flowers. But one of the things that he first of all said, and this is the breaking big news part of it all, is there's been a lot of conversation about a Lamar extension. Obviously, Josh Allen got his big extension earlier in the offseason, and the conversation after that shifted to Lamar. And okay, well, is Lamar going to get that deal? So he was asked, John Harbaugh, if the team has talked to Lamar about getting his contract or, an extension. He said, quote, "There's been conversations about that internally. I know. How far along that is or whatever, I don't know, but I definitely think it's an obvious point you're making. That's going to continue to have to be addressed, really, with all those guys. You just have to kind of manage that dance, the salary cap dance, and Lamar is the main part of that because he's the franchise player. That's a possibility. Sooner or later, that's definitely going to happen." And then he was followed up with a question about if it's hard to put a value on Lamar. He said, quote, "Yes, the value is the top. When Lamar gets paid, he's going to be the highest paid player in football, just like he was last time. I think every contract he signs, probably until he decides to hang up his cleats, he's going to be that guy." So again, there are expectations. We can speculate and talk about it on the show, and everybody can speculate and talk about it. But to hear John Harbaugh say, yeah, those are conversations that are being had, it's a decently big deal. I mean, Lamar's deal right now, obviously, he signed a couple of years ago, 5 years, $260 million, $135 million of that guaranteed. His cap hit this season is $43.65 million. Next year, that spikes up to $74.65 million. Josh Allen's deal that he got, because that is where everybody is looking and pointing, that's the big deal. He got a 6-year extension with Buffalo worth $330 million. $250 million of that is guaranteed. So that is the new standard. That is the new threshold. And the fact that the Bills got that done before any other quarterback with that threshold means that they have set the standard there. So whenever Lamar signs his deal, he will most definitely surpass that. And John Harbaugh with the glowing endorsement of, yeah, when he gets paid, he's going to be the highest paid player in football. John Harbaugh is making that clear about Lamar Jackson, which again, I think that's how it should be. But it's about, with all these premium positions, you kind of just stack, right? Like Josh Allen got his, Lamar's going to get his, and the next guy's going to get his. It's just everybody's surpassing. That's what happened last time, right? Jalen Hurts signed his deal right before Lamar. That kind of helped, honestly. Lamar signed his deal, and Lamar got a little bit higher. And then you get a little bit higher than that, a little bit higher than that. It's just how it works, especially at the quarterback position. So, it's not a surprise. There was always going to be a conversation about if Lamar is going to be extended this offseason, if they were going to wait until next offseason. But seemingly it feels like the expectation, at least from what John Harbaugh said, especially with the fact that those conversations are already happening, according to John Harbaugh, that, hey, we could see that happen sooner rather than later. I think another big point that, one that at least I thought was interesting about Lamar Jackson that John Harbaugh had to say. He was asked about the growth of Lamar Jackson. How he's growing every year. He said, quote, well, Lamar's supposed to grow. He works hard. He's got that growth mindset. He wants to be better. That's the thing. That's what I love about Lamar Jackson. He just wants to improve all the time. He's never satisfied. And he talks about winning the Super Bowl. And when he wins the Super Bowl, not if, but when he wins the Super Bowl, he's still not going to be satisfied. He's going to want to get another one. And that's just the way he's built. Look, Lamar is a star. He's one of the best talents in this league. And with that comes a lot of pressure and a lot of expectations. So every year when you have the team that the Ravens have and the quarterback that the Ravens have, there is going to be that pressure and a failure if you do not get to /win the Super Bowl. Where regular season success is important. I've talked about it, but at the end of the day, the big goal is to get to the big dance and win that big game. So Lamar does have that mindset. We know how much of a competitor Lamar Jackson is. And it should be a surprise to no one that, Lamar is so locked in of winning a Super Bowl or about winning a Super Bowl. We've seen him get in that locked in mode. After games where the Ravens blow out teams by 30, he's like, man, I really wish I had played better, or I made a big mistake here. And I really want to fix that moving forward. Not even talking about all the good that happened. That's how locked in. It felt like Lamar was so locked in last season. I mean, we were on this show mostly after every single game talking about how locked in Lamar looked and how locked in Lamar's answers were. And I know he would do anything to win a Super Bowl. And I agree with John Harbaugh here, where I think that it's when for Lamar, not if. Because, yes, Lamar Jackson, he's a couple years away from 30 years old. No, he hasn't made it to a Super Bowl yet. But some of the greatest quarterbacks we've ever seen play this game, they also had a bit of a struggle getting to and winning a Super Bowl early in their careers. Not everybody can be Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes in terms of that early career success. But you know what? Whether you win the Super Bowl when you're 23 or you win the Super Bowl when you're 30, it counts all the same. It's a Super Bowl championship, and it goes down on your resume as that. And so this is a big year for Baltimore. We know that. But when you talk about a Lamar extension, just lowering that $43 million cap hit would be massive. And John Harbaugh's right. It is a salary cap dance, and Lamar's contract is the biggest one when you talk about that dance. There's not a cap hit larger on the Ravens right now than Lamar Jackson's. And so obviously you'll deal with that down the line, but I do think that you do want to push that money down the line and that cap hit down the line, because this is a big year for Baltimore. And I've talked about it over and over again on the show, where you didn't lose a ton of big free agents this year. In fact, in my opinion, you lost no big free agents this year, and you're able to build upon that. You don't want to waste a year like that, where next season I think there's going to be a lot more change and a lot more turnover, particularly the tight end position, which we'll get to in a couple minutes here in the second part of the show. But another extension that could potentially happen is Derrick Henry's extension, where Derrick Henry signed really good deal for Baltimore, got him 2 years, $16 million. He's in the last year of his contract. John Harbaugh is asked if extending Derrick Henry is a priority. He said, quote, "It's definitely in the conversation. I know that's been talked about, and yes, I'd love to see that get done as well." So it seems like Lamar and Derrick Henry are the two biggest extension candidates on the Ravens right now. You have other guys you could think about. Odafe Owe obviously is one of them, and you have a couple of other names that could make sense. Roquan Smith restructure. You can obviously talk about others with Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, Zay Flowers, all those guys coming down the pipeline. Not everybody's eligible yet, right? But you have other guys coming down the pipeline that are going to be really important. And so Lamar's deal will help with, hey, maybe the Ravens want to make a big move at edge or a big move on the defensive line, right? Could Baltimore do that because you are able to lower the cap hit on Lamar Jackson? That's going to be a really important and a really big conversation moving forward. But again, John Harbaugh's comments seem to indicate that, hey, maybe that Lamar deal does happen in, I don't know what the timeline would be. John Harbaugh said he didn't know what that was all about either, the timeline. But I'm not going to say I'd be shocked if it didn't happen before the season started, but certainly feels like we might be headed in that direction. Coming up in the second part of the show, though, we'll continue talking about John Harbaugh's comments, talk about what we got to say about Mark Andrews, and so much more coming up next on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you and sponsored by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you the full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. We're back our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Tuesday edition of the show, talking Ravens, talking what John Harbaugh had to say at the league meetings on Monday. Let's round this whole conversation out about Lamar Jackson with another Lamar Jackson quote. We're going to get to Mark Andrews in just a second here. But John Harbaugh was asked about how he feels about Lamar not winning the MVP last season. He said, well, Lamar is my MVP. I can tell you that. Lamar Jackson to me is my MVP, but he has been every year. He had a great season. He's a team player. That's what he cares about the most, and that's what's most important to Lamar and to all of us, but I'm always proud of Lamar. John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson have such a special bond with one another. The coach-player relationship that they have together. It's a big reason why I think John Harbaugh is still with the team. And, to have your quarterback believe in you and for your quarterback, to have your coach believe in you like that, it's a really big deal. It's a really important thing. And John has always supported Lamar, and the Ravens have always supported Lamar. It's really cool to see the love that continues to get passed back and forth between, members of the organization and Lamar Jackson. There's just such an affinity for one another. And that all does help in the grand scheme of things. It creates positive culture and, a positive atmosphere. And it's a big deal. So that's another point about Lamar Jackson. But let's move away from Lamar Jackson. Let's talk about Mark Andrews a little bit. Mark Andrews has been a big polarizing conversation, definitely throughout the Ravens fan base. And obviously organizationally, I'm sure about what the future of Mark Andrews should be or what that all holds. Mark obviously had a career high in touchdowns last season in the regular season with 11 after a slow start to the year. But, we all know what happened against the Bills. In the playoffs, Mark hasn't shown up a ton, and that's a bit of a concern, most definitely. He's making some of the most money on the team, and they have Isaiah likely waiting in the wings. It all is a big conversation. All three tight ends on the roster are in the last year of their contracts. This is most likely I'd be floored if all three return next season. So this is probably kind of the last year of this tight end room, but it feels like this will be the tight end room next year. The Ravens picked up or I guess they let it be picked up, the $4 million roster bonus that Mark Andrews had due a couple of weeks ago. And when John Harbaugh was asked about Mark Andrews, if they've been in contact with one another, John Harbaugh said, yes, we've been in contact back and forth. It's not like guys want to hear from me every day, any of them. But he ended up saying Mark is in a good place. He was working really hard. And John Harbaugh said, quote, I do fully expect him to be playing for us next year. He's just too good a player. And he said, quote, Mark would be one of the few guys I would expect to be here. So we'll see what happens. My plans are that we've got Mark, we've got Isaiah Likely, we've got Charlie Kohler, and we've got Pat Ricard all in place doing all those jobs. At this point, I just think there's a bigger conversation to be had about Mark Andrews, where at this point, it would probably take a lot for Baltimore to move Mark Andrews. It doesn't make sense for them to cut him. I think he's too good of a player. Obviously, everybody looks at the Buffalo game, and it's unfortunate what happened, but Mark is still a top 5 tight end, right? He's still a very talented football player. He still can help, whether it's the Ravens or another team. And I'm glad it's probably going to be the Ravens this upcoming season. Even if he's not getting the ball a lot, his presence out on the field, teams have to account for him, and that frees up guys like Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, Rashod Bateman, etc. But I did put out a poll on YouTube, and I do a poll almost every day on YouTube, every single weekday, definitely on YouTube. And I just asked the question, who's the best tight end on the Ravens roster? It's an interesting question. Right, I'm just going to read off the results right now. Mark Andrews, 23%. Isaiah Likely, 75%. And Charlie Kohler getting some love at 2%. Yeah, let's go, Charlie Kohler. But yeah, Isaiah Likely, 75% of the vote is who is the best tight end on the Ravens roster. Obviously, as the day goes on, those results might change. Maybe it gets more in favor of Isaiah Likely. Maybe Mark Andrews makes a comeback. I don't know. But for right now, Isaiah Likely, according to these votes, is the overwhelming tight end 1 on the roster. You have to find a way to involve both. And here's the honest truth about the situation for both Mark and Isaiah Likely. It brings both their values down, just from their own value perspective. If I'm Isaiah Likely, I'm not thrilled with this situation in terms of the contract that he could be getting. Because if Isaiah was the tight end 1 and Mark wasn't there to compete for targets, Isaiah would be, he'd have more catches, he'd have more targets, he had more receiving yards. It's a good thing for the Ravens as a team. The Ravens are a better team with both Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, right? But I think that their values get kind of washed out by one another, where they're probably going to split stuff again. And again, there is enough football to go around. I know that was a big common theme with Greg Roman of there's not enough football to go around. And that was true at the time, but they're a much more balanced offense. They're throwing the ball a lot more than they were under Greg Roman. There is enough ball to go around, but it's just different being a tight end 1 and you are the guy, the tight end 1, versus splitting time, not knowing who's actually tight end 1. It kind of feels like the Rashod Bateman, Odell Beckham Jr. thing a couple of years ago, where it's we never knew who wide receiver 2 was. They were splitting time. It was bringing both their values down. It's kind of the same thing, but it is such a good thing for Baltimore. I want to reiterate that. This is best case scenario for the Ravens. Now, it's a big chunk of money to commit to Mark Andrews in the tight end position. I'm not going to say it's not, but I think it's a really big deal that, again, you have so many threats on your offense, because we saw how deadly it can be, especially when everybody's hitting on all cylinders. So, that is what it is, and I'm really excited about it. John Harbaugh also talked about DeAndre Hopkins, and he said a line that, might be the line that stuck out the most to me during the entire press conference or media availability. He said, quote, "He's a guy that I've always felt like should be a Raven." And diving more into it, the quote continued, "That was always something I always kind of thought when I watched him play, and when we were playing against him. I felt the same way about Derrick Henry and Lamar when we saw him in college, but to see him now with us in our building, working out already with the guys, it's pretty cool." We can have the conversation about DeAndre again. I mean, he's a player that is going to come in, be behind Zay Flowers and Rashod Bateman. You're not asking him to be a wide receiver 1 in this offense, which I think is better for DeAndre's health, better for DeAndre's production. I think DeAndre will have a resurgent bounce back season. I think he is a better version and a cheaper version of what they signed Odell to a couple of years ago. And now Lamar Jackson has had the opportunity to play with both guys, or at least he will, to play with both guys that he wanted to play with back when he was going through his whole contract situation. He went to the Ravens, went to Eric DeCosta, Steve Bisciotti, John Harbaugh said, "I want to play with Odell or DeAndre Hopkins. Could you make that happen?" They signed Odell to be a part of the team for the 2023 season. And then now DeAndre Hopkins comes in for 2025. So it should be exciting for that. Other things that John Harbaugh had to say quickly here, and we'll kind of dive into it in just the beginning part of the final part of the show as well. He feels like the Ravens offense still hasn't reached its ceiling yet. 3.0 as we call it, apparently. That's what the Ravens call it right now. He said 3.0 as we call it, to get to this point where we're doing more things better. We want to do more, and we want to do it fundamentally better. He also talked about, mock drafts. That's a valuable tool for them. Public consensus. They're looking at a bunch of different things. So, hey, maybe he looks at Locked On Ravens mock draft Sundays. Who knows? we've hit on some picks the Ravens have had over the season. So you know what? Maybe I'm actually drafting for the Ravens. I don't know. Maybe that's a thing. Michael Pierce, he made sure to talk about how happy he was for Michael Pierce and what a great career he had, and talked about the interception, what a way it was for him to go out. Still one of my favorite Ravens moments of literally all time there. He talked about the tush push a little bit. He said they're unsure which way the organization is going to vote on that, but he does think that, it's a football play, so there's that conversation. I know that's a very controversial point throughout the league. Talked about Keaton Mitchell, said that he expects Keaton Mitchell to be on a whole different level this season. Obviously, he's another year removed from that knee injury, the ACL tear, which was, a pretty big deal. And sometimes it just takes guys more time to come back from that stuff. And that's okay. That's natural. It's not something that I was expecting Keaton to come back and look like himself and feel 100% confident. It's just different. So there's a whole conversation about that in Keaton Mitchell. And obviously he has some good things to say about Trenton Simpson as well. People are expecting Trenton Simpson to maybe break out this season. I know that was a last year thing, but they're holding out hope. John Harbaugh said that the Ravens would draft a kicker if the team feels it needs to do so. And if the right guy is there, Randy Brown, their senior special teams coach, is looking at kickers right now. I would expect the Ravens to draft a kicker in the later rounds. I just feel like this is the year that they will do it, obviously, with everything surrounding Justin Tucker, both on and off the field. Feels like the year that, they're going to do it. He said the Ravens will, they're ready to line up and play right now. Pleased with the team's depth, and I am too overall. I mean, they definitely need to make a couple more moves. Hopefully a big move is on the horizon too. But, you have a clear path of like, okay, edge, defensive line, corner, safety, maybe an extra offensive lineman. Like you have a path that you can see of what the Ravens' next steps are there. So John Harbaugh speaking. I'm not sure when or if Eric DeCosta will speak, but you know what? If he speaks today, we'll react to it tomorrow. Just it's the circle of life here on Locked On Ravens. Again, we got you covered with daily Ravens coverage, and coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the Ravens, their international news as well as some more draft talk. So stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the net. The tournament games happening almost every day. There's always something exciting to bet on, and the FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. We're back here rounding out Locked On Ravens on this Tuesday. Kevin Oestreicher here with you, talking Ravens football as we do here each and every single weekday on Locked On Ravens. Be sure, again, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and in audio form. We're 5 days a week plus more, and we have you covered every single day with Baltimore Ravens content here, whether you're an everyday or a first-time listener, somewhere in the middle. Thank you for your support and for tuning in. I actually went down to Camden Yards for the Orioles opening day yesterday and met a ton of listeners, a ton of watchers. It was awesome. So if you were one of the people who came up to me, thank you. It was really, really cool to be able to meet some of the people who listen and watch the show. And, we've been building this thing up since 2019. So it's been incredible to be on this journey with all of you. And I cannot wait to continue it. And hopefully we get to cover a Super Bowl winning Ravens team this year. But the Ravens, we got some international news from the Ravens yesterday. It wasn't all just about John Harbaugh. It's really exciting, actually, and we're going to talk about it right here, where the Ravens have joined the NFL's Global Markets program in the United Kingdom. So obviously the Ravens, they've played in London twice, and there's a big following over in the UK. But now, with the NFL's Global Markets program, they've been granted international marketing rights to build brand awareness and fandom beyond the U.S. through fan engagement events, commercial opportunities, and NFL flag development. So shout out to Ryan Mink over at BaltimoreRavens.com for this information article here that I'm reading from. This is just a really cool thing in general. Now, as Ryan notes in the article here, the Ravens will continue their efforts to reach fans in the Baltimore market and domestically. The expansion in global branding does not mean the Ravens will necessarily play abroad more often moving forward, and the team is not slated to host an international game in 2025. So this global markets program has grown to 29 teams across 21 markets, and the Ravens, one of the 7 teams that hadn't opted into the program before this year. So it's going to be a really exciting thing to kind of see the fan base continue to expand, efforts to market, grow internationally. Obviously, it's a big point throughout the NFL to grow the game internationally, and that's why you have these programs. And now that Baltimore's joining one, especially in an area in the world where there is a very big, and not to say that there aren't obviously big fan bases in other parts of the world as well, but obviously I think with the Ravens playing there twice and having a relationship and this, that, and the other, it does make sense why this is the move that's happening right now. So really awesome. I'm really glad that's happening, and it should be really cool to see how the Ravens in the NFL continue to grow the game, especially across the world. Let's dive into some draft talk here again. Draft less than a month away. I don't know how we got here, but we're here. I think for Baltimore, as we've said, 11 picks, it's a lot of picks. You know, I go through my mock drafts every single week, and I'm just like, man, I've already taken 2 offensive linemen and 2 DBs and 2 defensive linemen. Like, where else am I picking guys? What are the positions? But we do know the Ravens, they need a lot of guys on rookie contracts to contribute. 4 years, 5th-year option, whatever it may be, with players like Lamar Jackson and Ronnie Stanley's new deal, Roquan Smith, obviously guys who are going to sign extensions as well down the line. You hope in a player like Kyle Hamilton or Tyler Linderbaum or Zay Flowers or whatnot. You need to be able to have contributors, rookie, 2nd year, 3rd year, 4th year guys who can come to you and make, all pro level contributions, Pro Bowl level contributions on lesser salaries. Obviously, Nate Wiggins, Roger Rosengarten, those are examples of this. Other draft picks as well, not just those 2 guys. But I think there's a set plan that they can have here where I know a lot of people weren't very fond of the Matthew Golden pick I had yesterday. But again, the reason I do that is so that we talk about a different scenario every week on the show. It'd just be boring. I said it yesterday. It'd just be boring if I came on here and talked about the same players every week for 2 months, right? I want to differentiate things, switch things up. So no, wide receiver is not a big need for the Ravens. And I'm very happy I can say that after all the years we've spent on the show talking about wide receiver, go get a wide receiver. But we know the Ravens' best player available. They will take a guy, even if it's not their biggest positional need, and they will figure out the rest later. I expect them to do that, but there are enough positions where you can look at, again, DB, D-line, edge, offensive line, whatever it may be, to where they can use a guy at one of those positions, have it be a BPA pick, and it still makes sense for what the roster actually needs. So let's get into a couple more. We do obviously mock drafts on every Sunday. I put that on social media. We talk about them on Monday. So if you haven't checked out Monday's show, be sure you go do so. Well, let's get into a couple more listener/watcher mock drafts. Again, I put this on social media. Then you can comment down below and have a shot to have them read out on the show here. I like reading them off. I like talking about them. So let's get into a couple here. First one from TD, who has the Ravens taking Nick Gawerton, edge from Texas A&M at 27. Deion Walker, defensive lineman from Kentucky at 59. Jaden Higgins, Iowa State wide receiver at 91. Logan Brown, Kansas offensive lineman at 129. Malachi Moore, safety from Alabama at 136. Jack Kaiser, linebacker from Notre Dame at 176. Zah Frazier, corner from UTSA at 183. Vernon Broughton, defensive lineman from Texas at 203. Phil Maffa, the running back from Clemson at 210. Luke Lachey, tight end from Iowa at 212. And Johnny Walker, edge from Missouri at 243. I think Jaden Higgins is one of the more underrated players in this draft. Obviously, as a wide receiver. When do the Ravens need to take a wide receiver? I don't know. It's not a big need for them. I'm not expecting it on day 1 or day 2, but I think Jaden Higgins does make sense as a later day 2 pick, 91 there. I'd be fine with that, especially because you do build the trenches here on the defensive line with Gawerton and Deion Walker at 27 and 59. I mean, 3 of the first 4 picks are trenches. I mean, Logan Brown coming in as an offensive guy. So I like the way that is structured, where you're still taking needs, but you're able to throw a wide receiver in there if that is the BPA, which is, I think, a really good way to approach things here. Defensive back, 183 is the first first cornerback taken. Zah Frazier, obviously Malachi Moore is 136. I think Malachi Moore is, he's underrated to me, is a 4th-round guy. I like that pick a lot for Baltimore if they opt not to go. If like a Malachi Starks isn't available, Nicky Manwari, I like that option for them. So I think this is a really overall solid mock draft here. I know the running back conversation is another big one as well. We talked about Keaton Mitchell earlier in the show, but with 4 running backs already on the roster, is Rasheen Ali someone who's not going to be a part of the team if they draft somebody in this draft? That's another big conversation there. So shout out to Tatey. Appreciate you submitting the mock draft. Let's also now get into one from Barrett King 89, who has the Ravens taking Jalon Walker, linebacker from Georgia at 27. Mike Green, edge from Marshall at 59. I want to pause here. How in the world did this happen? Mike Green at 59, Jalon Walker at 27. This is already an A. I don't care what else. You could trade all your picks away for nothing, and this would still be an A with these 2 picks. But Xavier Rethbro, the wide receiver from Miami, at 91. Gunnar Helm, Texas tight end at 129. Sebastian Castro, safety from Iowa at 136. Jalen Smith, corner from USC at 176. Noah Williams, corner from California at 183. It's your Stackhouse, defensive lineman from Georgia at 203. Tyler Batty, edge from BYU at 210. Carson Vincent, offensive tackle from Alabama A&M at 212. And Addison West, offensive guard from Western Michigan, at 243. Yeah, I still can't get over the whole Mike Green thing. I'll be honest with you. Mike Green, it's kind of like me. I had Kenneth Grant in the second round at 59 yesterday, and everyone's like, how in the world you get Kenneth Grant to fall? And I'm like, look, you take what the mock draft simulator gives you. So you know what? This is exactly what happened here. You take what the mock draft simulator gives you. It's not a secret how much I love Mike Green in this draft. I don't think it's realistic he falls to Baltimore at 27, even based off of the pre-draft process he's had. Super productive player, super physical player. It'd be a dream if he was at 27, let alone 59. And you talk about Jalon Walker, who, again, can be that inside-outside player at the linebacker spot. I mean, that would solve a lot of problems on the Ravens defense if you're able to get one of those 2 guys, let alone both of them, in the same draft. The Gunnar Helm pick is interesting, though. I do like the conversation, whether it is like a Luke Lachey later, Gunnar Helm in the middle rounds. There is a conversation to be had about, do the Ravens keep 4 tight ends on their roster this year because all 3 of the guys already are on the last year of their deals. So I think they might want to have some level of insurance because, yes, I feel like Isaiah Likely will be back. I feel like Charlie Kohler will probably be back. It feels like Timmy Mark is the odd man out there. But this could be – I'm always like a 3 tight end guy on the roster. That's what I feel like is the right number. But this year, I think I'm going to make an exception and say that I'm okay with 4, which obviously would mean that, a guy like Gunnar Helm makes sense. You get 2 DBs back to – well, actually 3 DBs back-to-back. Keep rounding out the trenches there, I see. So, again, it's kind of like you have a needs-based draft here where it's edge, D-line, safety, corner, and you can take 1 or 2 guys from that pool. There's a lot of talent in this draft. I'm really excited to see how it all plays out for the Ravens. That's all I have for you here today, though. I'm Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in to the show. On the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form and audio form. Again, we're 5 days a week for your daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, you know what time it is. There's more Ravens coverage on Locked On Ravens, so be sure to stay tuned here. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.